where I came and I will leave from. This hotel, they offered to let us store our bags. I say us, a young man named Ian from Los Angeles who's staying in the same hostel tagged along just because I knew the arrangement for buses, which is fairly complex. He's off on his own, as I will be for myself for the next 4 to 6 hours that we're here. The fountain was kind of pretty. I don't know if it's that old, but this is the park. It's a pretty park. That area over there for some kind of concessionary swap meet or something like that. And then we'll go down through here, hit the main drag, and then go off to our left. Orientators, we're right down here in the bottom right-hand corner where you see those 3 or 4 red arrows. We're going to walk through the park and hang a left down Corso via Vito Emanuele. So far this looks like a very pretty little small town, which is the primary reason I wanted to come here. But isn't this a beautiful main arcade with these lovely trees? And of course it's all set up for tourists, which probably show up here in buses. Being in Catania, other than the area that I traveled in yesterday, but where I am at the hostel there, it's as Harry Chapin said, I spent a month one night in Buffalo. But this is very pretty. Look like it's very old, Porto Reale, or King's Portal, or entryway into the town. This is a view down the main drag, Emanuele. There must be a tour bus here somewhere, but they'll move on rapidly. This is all the ambience so far of a small little town that's preserved its uniqueness and its age, whatever that might be, and kept it up because they recognized at some point that it was a tourist business that they could capitalize on. See more of these streets with 6 hours to kill. It was an older town, but probably not necessarily a wealthy town, so this might have been as good as it got, except for some exclusive houses. We'll see if this is the Church of the Immaculate Heart. I mean, not the restaurant, but what's beyond it. I assume this is a young girl riding a dolphin, but it's a pretty little fountain. Nice big fountain bowl, if you will. And of course that green foliage makes it look kind of pretty. This is that church. We're looking at 2 churches here. Interesting looking tower. And that grill work over the windows is interesting because it's fairly massive, but the holes are too big in the mesh to stop pigeons, so you wonder if it really is designed to stop people who might climb up there. Maybe somebody already did. And we're looking back down the main drag. Here on a statue that covers, or that's on a top of a portion of this complex. So I just pan the rest of the way. This is probably living quarters, or maybe it's for the rest of the churches. I don't know till I go inside. Very white. This tower belongs to the Church of St Salvador. It is now the Archaeological Museum. Got to be more to this complex than we're allowed to see. At least I can't see access to the inside here, but I think there's a large courtyard inside. This church is right across the street from that archaeological museum. It's just filled with a tourist group, so I'll wait. This is the Noto Cathedral with the Basilica of San Nicholas. I don't know whether they've cleaned it up or what, but you still notice some red up on top of the 2 towers, one to the left, one to the right. It's the top of the church that we looked at but didn't go in because the tour group was in. We'll go in later. This may be the entrance to that church that is also the Archaeological Museum. This building continues in a long direction down to the left, so it's a pretty sizable structure, to say the least. This is a very pretty church. You can see that that's all new, but unlike that church Casa Professor in Palermo, it looks like those were original colors. But this is very tastefully done. Interesting choice of words. You've got that dark navy blue used as a trim, and then this pink color. And notice how the blue's picked up in some of the iconography. Very lovely. Notice how that center panel is contrasted with the other two windows, as well as those little side panels with the dark brown versus the white. Very elegantly done. I wonder what this would be called. French something or other, maybe? Probably one of the prettiest churches I've seen. Not spectacular, although it's very well and nicely done, but pretty. Appear to be a recent paint job, although the actual panels may be, but they don't look so new either when you get up close. Notice that those are the feet of an animal. We'll take a closer look at these panels. I'll shake a little bit because I'm in a weird position. That's an interesting piece of sculpture there. It's so white that you can't make out much of the detail. We'll go in close to see what we can see. A little bit better. We'll use a telephoto just to go in really close. Now imagine if in the day these were actually painted. The colors that so often we're told such work was painted. This would really stand out. But now for most of the world, it's a big blob of plaster. And what are the pieces of wood sticking out symbolizing? The rays of light from that symbol, which may stand for Jesus Christ? We'll do a tight pan of one of these vertical faux columns. I forget what the archaeological term is for that. And now we're going to climb up into the tower. First of all to the top of these stairs, and then through a couple of doors, and then up into the tower. I've seen Jesus with a sword in his hand, but I haven't seen that icon too often before. Vaguely in my mind, I get a connection. This is the first church that we looked at. We looked up to this tower. Just a pan in front of it. There's the park that we walked down. So over there is the bus stop. Interestingly enough, the legend that's associated with this is, interestingly enough, a nun who was here. And this is part of a novel too. A nun who lived in this convent when it was a convent fell in love with a young man. But the young man ended up marrying another woman, of course, and plaintively she looked out the window at the marriage ceremony while she's talking to the Italian folks. I'll pan this portion so we see yet another church to go to. It all looks so much the same that it kind of reminds me of Trapani. Almost too authentic to be authentic.
Siamo a 12-15 km da qui, sorgeva sul Monte Alberia, totalmente distrutta dal terremoto del 1693, venne ricostruita più a valle. Ci si spostò di territorio, siamo a 7 km dalla costa e quindi con i rapporti commerciali più facilitati. Nella ricostruzione due vie importantissime. Il Corso Vittorio Emanuele, questo qui, è la via degli ordini religiosi. Tutti i monasteri importanti.
See that there is something down there, a cloister. I don't think we had access to it. Indicated in the old days that this was a convent, obviously for women, and it was built by the wealthy, and primarily it sprung from the concept of progenitor, in which the oldest first, in other words, oldest and first, redundant, son gets everything. He gets married. The daughter, first daughter, gets married. Second son becomes bureaucrat, soldier, or priest. The woman, the second daughter or third daughter, apparently comes here, but it's unclear to me from her explanation why that was mandated. Why was she not married off as a second tier of power? Apparently that window that the nun looked out of, and it also became a movie, which is an iconic and classic Italian movie, apparently. Incidentally, this Emmanuel Street is orientated east and west to catch the sun, in theory. And the church was here, and there was another, I think the other side was where the wealthy homes were, something like that. But anyway, it was designed to symbolize the connection between the wealthy and the church, and that the solidifying of that because of the sun. This is interesting just because of the artwork, and here you can see the little bit of plaster and then the painting that went on that. So to restore this, I assume you have to restore the plaster as well. This may be one of the original old portions of the church.
City, because produced the stone, this stone, it's a very precious.
And used by the wealthy and the churches.
And before, the pavement of this church was in the ceramic of Catania.
I don't know if this ever was a cloister or just a center courtyard. Here the grill work, presumably to protect something, but I don't know what, unless it's a design element, which is possible. Notice this is all new work. This serves a very important role in this church. This is called a jealousy. Now go figure out the etymology of that. But its purpose was, up here in the contadina, and that's my use of the word, the choir would be, and the nuns would be, and the Mother Superior. The ladies were not allowed out of this convent ever. That was a suicide, social suicide. So they could look through the grill and see the procession, and they could also look through here to see the church service. But others could not look up and through this to see them. Very much what the Muslims do and did with their homes to quote-unquote protect their girls. This is wood, and it was restored in 2000, and that one is metal. Now the paintings were in 2000 something or other were cleaned, but she assures me they were not restored. Just to add a little bit of detail from the little tour. The pink color represents femininity, the blue represents the sky, and the goose of gold represents, of course, the power of God. Up there, the symbol that we saw earlier is actually Hebrew for God. And the two women on either side represent the New Testament and the Old Testament. We'll go over and visit this church, the cathedral now, and the Basilica of St. Nicholas. The dome, if it looks new, it's because it is. Some years ago, you can check the date, that an earthquake occurred and that entire dome collapsed. And then I think there was a subsequent earthquake a few years later, and 3 of the columns inside the church collapsed. Then they rebuilt that, but they did not restore the original artwork because, first of all, apparently in the 18th century it had been restored and they did a botched job. So they really didn't see the need to try to restore, and perhaps it was even to restore to what, if it had already been covered and or damaged by the botched job. So they just did new artwork that was less expensive and was achievable. So we continue on. With all due respect to the church, the use of this stone to me seems not quite as pretty. It is an impressive street of monumental buildings in this colored stone and in apparent great shape. First impression as I look down through this is that it's all been whitewashed into this this cream color, and that artwork has been added simply so it won't be absolutely blasé. Design, it seems, a church that is massive in its columns merely to be massive in appearance, but without anything much else to redeem it. Presumably one or more of the columns to my right and left collapsed, as did this entire dome. But the artwork looks pretty simple. That almost unfinished. And again, this very simple in concept and in execution, it seems almost cartoonish. This altar table, for lack of a better definition, seems the more interesting in a way, but it may just be faux work, as those chairs appear to be. Nothing truly artistically grand. This is definitely the prettiest part of this cathedral. Whether it was damaged, I don't know. I think several of these smaller domes were. But this is somewhat like the church we were just in the lightness of its artistic execution. The church is so simple looking that it could have been built and finished last week, and I would not be surprised. I can't tell whether this is artwork. I think it is. I think those are elements from a boat. Maybe this is a tribute to one of the saints of fishermen or something like that. This may be a model of the church showing part of what was damaged. Although I can't be sure, that part up on top is the dome. Maybe that reflects the little that was left. This apparent advertisement for the museum seems to suggest that that's what that little section there is. It's even more so showing what was left. It's got to be disheartening. But yet, more of it could have been destroyed. Up at the cathedral again, can you see the top of the dome and the cupola? There's something radiating back some red and green color. At least I can see a little snippet of it. Wonder what that is. This is the town hall, also known as the Palazzo Ducezio. For the record, this is apparently the Bishop's Palace, the tribute to fallen warriors in the First World War. Many buildings you see those metal devices that have posts and bands of steel that run through these buildings. Probably proactive attempt to control the effect of any earthquake that occurs now. The begging fetish here, and that is little guys, young people walk around with a basket with parakeets on it. Apparently, for some reason, believing that we're inspired to give money because of the parakeet. And just a pan on the street as I cruise down it. Interesting about this tour shop ensconced, if you will, in that entry to this church building. The chapel of San Carlo. I don't know where this comes from, if it's always been here to provide a blockage of the direct view from the street. Again, the ceiling and the paintings look like they were certainly cleaned, if not restored and or repainted. White and lightness dominates these churches, even though their actual construction is quite heavy. Notice how the detail is not embellished by color at all. I would not thought that was the way it was originally designed or built. Is interesting because neither the priests nor those criminals who are relating their sins to them have any privacy at all. It's not like you're not going to know which priest you're talking to. This is a nice piece of work. Looks like it's inlaid stone in this side chapel. In itself quite simple. Chapel I meant doesn't indent much, as you can see. And considerable simplicity. No embellishment, even when it's possible by painting those colors. Again, it looks like the Hebrew letters in the center. Beautiful old shelving systems for this pharmacy. Hopefully they're actually authentic and maybe from here. It's interesting. The little balcony, I suspect that that's relatively new in order to provide a lighting and a canopy for the counter. This is interesting. It's street artwork, if you will, made of flowers and of grasses and that sort of thing. We'll pan up through it. It's nice that towns like this are preserved. It's a contrast to Palermo and Catania, where you have to dig a lot of it out. Interesting water feature. One of the gods, no doubt. Don't know which one.
Come anche le cappelle laterali sono originali, sono coronate le due navate centrali. It's
interesting because it almost seems to be in the equal-sided cross design of the Byzantium churches. Notice how those columns bulge in the center. Strange church, you get the feeling that it's been purposely denuded of anything that would be dramatic. The only use of color, it appears to be this gold, even though there's lots of sculptured relief detail, if you will, that could be aggrandized. Here, a crypt grave. I wonder if his crypt is associated with that chapel at all. But you know that large panel behind which that simple painting is had a large painting in it at one time. A very old confessional. I hope that whiteness is not the salt from the tears of the penitents. Small lapidarium here, but I don't know what these pieces are from, unless this church also suffered some kind of collapse. This is a small, very interesting, intricate little sculpture or set piece, composed probably of individual pieces. Is he playing a pan flute? Perhaps a lamb for slaughter? They were big on that in those days. Fish and another lamb, perhaps? Perhaps these statues once stood in some more prominent place, maybe on the outside. Interesting how churches become abandoned. I think this is a video of the rebuilding of the cathedral's dome. The process by the archaeologists of determining how to do that. What remains and what did not remain. Surely one of the priests had to ask, why our church, God? Must have been disheartening. Guessing that across the street. This would have been the entryway for this palazzo. You would have driven your carriage into through this arched area. These are Italian, this is the way they talk. They're worse than I am when I get excited. We'd be entering into the foyer, is that how you would call it? I think, with these chandeliers. Whether it was all enclosed in the day, I don't know. It looks more like this was the purpose. It's not somebody's palace, but a theater. Can you imagine the magnificent nights? People who have arrived in their carriages and then whoever the guys that run carriages takes the carriage away and they come in with their elegant gowns and men's suits and tux or whatever they wore, maybe their military splendor if they had that background. Took their seats. Imagine the intrigues. When you sat in the box, it may be your family's box, and you looked across, as the movies do, at the girls or the guys that you were interested in. Here to give us a clue about what it sounds like. I tried a little whistle, but it seemed rather dead. Not the same thing as listening to somebody on the stage. Perhaps an orchestra or other support. Were there operas given here? You would think it was used for everything. Reminds me of La Scala, probably smaller. It was 45, 50 years ago I saw that. And that stage slopes down, and a doozy of a drop if you miss your cue. It seems to be thickly padded. At least the door is. I wonder if that helped the sound at all. But these walls have been richer than they are now in plain white. Imagine here, where you're almost with the actors, as close as you can get without having to say any lines. So imagine how your every move was scrutinized, unless you kept your girlfriend back here, or better still, back in that corner. The toilet. Exciting is to be one of our actors who gets to act in a movie with this as a set. For example, the young man who played Mozart in that movie, going to, I think it was Prague, where he was on the actual stage that Mozart used. To take us upstairs had we the right. She had been one of the great actresses of her day. It appears that the tour buses have already left, because it's quiet after I finished my lunch. Another church. We may have walked to the limit of the old part of this new town. Now I say it like that because when I get down here, or later this afternoon when I can get up a little bit higher in this town, I'll be able to video quite a distance, I think 7 or 15 kilometers away, where old Noto was before the earthquake which literally leveled the town. And so therefore they built a new town here. This is the end of the old part of the new town. Here starts what we would wish we could avoid. Go over and look at this old city fountain, and then we'll traverse up this way, but not by that street, and across the top, or towards the top of it. It's the original fountain. And maybe women washed clothes here. Maybe it was just a very pretty piece for this end of town. Maybe livestock could be watered here. But this is probably what was built at another time, although there may have been 3 fountains here. This one, the one in the middle, and let's go down and see if there was a 3rd one. Looks like there was. We were yesterday walking around Catania in one of the old neighborhoods after I'd had my ice cream and soda water. I'd seen a fat lady, black, go by me, and as I was walking in the back parts of those neighborhoods, I saw her again. And this time she had 2 large plastic containers that she was filling with water, suggesting to me that her home, or where she lived with her family, didn't have water, and she had to truck it up there each day. And here is 4. See if there's one on the other side. Nope. Since we got about 3 hours, we'll begin our walkabout. New, ugly, encroaching. I picked the most interesting streets to walk up. Here at this intersection, which seems to dead end, pretty little house there. This house nicely maintained. But we'll go this way. We're up a little bit higher. We'll keep going up, just for the fun of it. I don't know if this is... It is a dead end. Probably pretty old homes, nicely maintained, beautiful on the inside. Outstanding views across the valley. And here, an old water fountain, still usable, I believe, has a faucet handle on it with a little creche. And we'll go up this way. Here it's interesting because Mary's feeding Jesus. You don't see this that often. Like it's in the process of being restored. Every day in the hood. Take the stairway up. Pretty entryway roof, for lack of a better term. And these stairs just lead to several different doorways. It's an old building. One of the problems with these areas is there's no trees. Still, we can go on. Inside that door, if it's not just an abandoned growth, it may indicate an area where there could be a garden, but I think that's a room that may have a missing roof. Yeah, I think it's abandoned. The old door just off its hinges and sitting there. 3 different supports for these balconies. Like maybe it's gone through several hands of ownership. We have a view, but I don't think it should be to the main drag. Which I think, if my reckoning is correct, should run left and right, but I could be wrong. This may end at a dead end. I'm thinking it probably does. Yep. Pretty near the top, I would imagine, since this looks like an outcropping. Old building abandoned. Wonder if the EU prevents it being torn down. Peeked out. I'll start wandering down the street and to the left. It's interesting when I go down these streets and they're so close and narrow, and sometimes down the blind alleys, I can hear people chatting. Even now, smell fresh coffee having been brewed somewhere nearby. The house on the right-hand side looks to be abandoned. Maybe the lower floors aren't. Garden. We can get some more altitude. Here are a couple of old homes, or one big old home with 2 carriage entrances. The Church of Santa Maria del Gesù. I think that means Jesus. A convent also. Apartment up there is alluring with its covered deck. Probably an old palazzo. It's for sale now. And up on the right, another important building I'll show you. Lovely breeze place right where I'm standing. Notice how that building looks from those holes that we can see in it. That it's been stripped of probably statuary and other detail that were on it. Might not even have been a church, but it sure looks like one. This fortress-like building is the Chiesa Annunziata Badia. It's the Church of St Agata, which may be St Agata, which is interesting. She was martyred by the Romans in about 251 AD, I think it was, by having her breasts removed by pincers. I mean, were those people brutal? Bid we should waterboard anybody, the poor little guys. This would be more than happy to have the 9/11 Muslims and their ilk, wherever we catch them, subjected to martyr St Agatha's martyrdom. Was just killed because she was a nun who wouldn't give in to the emperor and let him in her pants. She stayed true to her religion. This was also converted into a hospital, but as you now can see, it's converted into nothing. A large building has all the look of a monastery or a nunnery. We're up on top here on a street that might have been important at one time. This building is interesting because of those prison-like grill works. Perhaps that's what it was. Who knows? It's the front of that building. Now we're starting back down. The red dome of one of those churches that we saw from that main street. And we're right behind the cathedral. And we'll walk the street behind the cathedral back in the direction of the park and the bus. Wide stairway. It must have been a welcoming stairway for a good area. Looking at the monastery again that we climbed up on top of, where we had the little guide giving us some information. Lovely balcony railings. Here an impressive back area of this building, which I think again is part of that monastery. Interesting shell, symbol of the Camino de Santiago. Using an alleyway. B&Bs around here. Take this last, possibly interesting street down to the main drag.